Hello everyone, and welcome to the Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK webinar. My name is Amber Jones. I'm a motorsport presenter, event host, and racing driver media trainer. Now, today we have a very, very exciting guest, Dr. Marcia Goddard, a neuroscientist, psychologist, and founder of Brain Matters UK. Marcia, how are you today?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I mean, I'm so excited to speak to you. Obviously, we've had a brief introduction beforehand, and I did say to you, I could chat to you for hours and hours and hours because this topic about the brain and neuroscience and psychology is so close to my heart. So I have a
Mhm.
million and one questions to ask you, as well as the people obviously listening in this webinar as well. So take it back to the beginning. Where did this interest in psychology start?
That's actually a very good question. So I've always had, so when I was younger, I thought I was not very intelligent. I went all through high school. I thought I'm not very smart. I'm not very smart. I'm not very smart. So I left school and I didn't go to university. I started just working and I was a management assistant, a personal assistant to a DJ. I did all sorts of things, but I was always helping people
Uh-huh.
in service-oriented roles. And there was one point where I was a secretary at some semi-governmental it was incredibly tedious and boring. I was not having a good time. But I realized that the common thread was always wanting to be of service. And I've always loved psychology. So that's when I
Uh-huh.
started to think maybe I should just try. Actually, funny story, I ended up not going because I was so scared that I was too dumb to finish a university degree that at first I thought, why don't I go work for a psychologist? And then I can ask her, like once she gotten to know me, I can ask her, like, do you think I should do it? And when I mustered up the courage to ask her, she said, nah, you're definitely not university material, so best not do that. So
Wow.
yeah, that's lovely, the impact
Uh-huh.
of one sentence. So I waited another year, but when I finally got started, I realized this is me, this is who I am, this is what I want to do with my life. And then, specifically the brain, when I was studying, we got to go to the morgue because I did
Uh-huh.
this minor in medicine and I got to dissect a brain, and that's where it's a little
And that's
weird,
where
but
the interest peaked.
love at first sight with my little dead brain.
I mean, it has to start somewhere, and it's a great story for it to start. So, is that how it then sort of skirted off to neuroscience in particular?
Yeah. So I'm trained as a clinical psychologist as well. So I kind of did two things at once. When I finished my master's degree, I started working as a clinical neuropsychologist, but at the same time, I did my PhD in neuroscience. So I kind of combined the helping people and being practical with my knowledge to also
Uh-huh.
doing the research. And when I ended up leaving academia, I still got to combine both of those. So yeah, I have a deep-seated love for both the psychology as well as the neuroscience behind it.
And how do the two sort of link together? Like, are they very, very closely linked, or are they sort of separated?
For me, they are because I really focus on brain behavior relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, like when I was doing my PhD, I did fairly fundamental research, and then the psychology is a little bit further detached from it because psychology is about, what drives us, why do we do what we do? And if you
Mm-hmm.
go to like the pure fundamental neuroscience, it's like action potentials and this brain area connected to that one.
Yeah.
So that's further from sort of the practical side, but I focus on brain behavior relationships, and those two things come together there.
But also, how do you go from a child that thinks they're not intelligent to someone working in psychology and neuroscience?
You got a minute? It was a journey. So I think basically what happened was I took the leap. And
Uh-huh.
for me, when I went to university, it was kind of it was my last chance. I thought, okay, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna try, I'm gonna get tutoring in all of the classes and we'll see where it goes. Then I had my first test, aced it. Second one, aced it. Third
Uh-huh.
one, aced it. And then I started to think, hold on a second, maybe I'm not done. And but slowly but surely, it's psychology is an interesting domain because as you're studying it, obviously you're starting to think to yourself as well, what am I like? Why am I the way that I am? And I
Uh-huh.
started to realize that I'd never learned how to learn. So high school was difficult for me because primary school was easy and then high school was difficult and I'd never learned how to learn. So that realization came throughout studying when I realized, oh, when I actually have something that I love doing, then it kind of comes natural, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the key. You know, if you have that passion, it doesn't feel like work or studying or all these things. It's sort of
Yep.
just, it can be stressful, but for the most part, it's kind of fun when you're doing all
Yeah.
these things and learning. So obviously you got your master's degree, you got the PhD, became a doctor. So then how does that then move over to working in high pressure environments? I'm sure in neuroscience there's so many routes and avenues that you can go down. What
Yeah.
made you want to go to more high performance and high pressure
Yeah.
environments?
Well, I think that was partially driven just by a love of fast cars and racing ever since I was a little girl. I
Uh-huh.
started watching Formula One as a 9-year-old with my dad. So that's always been, I guess, inside me. But when I decided to leave academia, it was because I wanted to contribute more. In academia, you write a grant proposal, then you pray that you get the money, and then you do the research, you write the paper, and then you never ever look at it ever again. And that
Yeah.
felt I was like, why are we, why are we doing this?
For what?
Yeah, well, who are we doing it for? Like, aren't we supposed to like go to the people? So I left academia to go to the people and
Uh-huh.
actually do something with all of that research. And that's how I ended up, because nobody would hire me because they're like, we don't know what to do with you. Until one entrepreneur said, I have my own company. We're going through a hyper growth phase. We're a high performing environment. Can you come in? Can you analyze our culture and help us figure out what we need to do to maintain that performance as the company changes? Which is obviously that was my dream.
Uh-huh.
So that's how it all started with one company, but then it sort of grew into what I'm doing now. So yeah, start small and scale up.
And then see what happens after that. I mean, genuinely, I think my whole career is just say yes to things and see where it takes you. And then you go,
I love
wow,
that. Yes,
I
that's
love
literally. So
this.
actually, if you want to go a little bit deeper into the origin story, I had actually consciously told myself because I was applying for jobs and nobody would hire me. And then I said, I'm going to say yes to anybody who wants to have a cup of coffee or anybody who
Uh-huh.
wants to do an interview with me. And I had won a science communication competition.
Hmm.
And that was broadcast on TV. And so there was a little bit of media attention. So I said yes to anybody that wanted to
Uh-huh.
interview me. And one of those interview requests was from a radio station, locally, small town in the Netherlands. I'm Dutch, I live in the Netherlands. And I think they had like 3 listeners, and one of them was a dog. So I said yes to that interview, but one of the 2 other listeners was that entrepreneur that I ended up working for. So it
Uh-huh.
is about saying yes, just going out there, trying, and then stuff starts to happen.
Exactly. I think it is that butterfly effect of, I don't know where this is going to lead me. It might take me somewhere amazing. Like, it's the
Mhm.
same with my journey that I never thought I would be a media trainer. That was never in my prospects when I wanted to be a motorsport presenter. And I said
Yeah,
yes to things and started doing things. And I was like, oh, wow, you're good at this. Oh, I can do this more. Now I'm qualified to do this. And it's
yeah,
crazy. It takes you on this whole journey. So obviously you started off then in more corporate, would I
yeah.
say corporate, high pressure, high performance environments? And then how did you move over to motorsport and sports?
Hmm. Um, I'm very stubborn. So I started studying high performance in organizations, and I started looking at what are some of the things that these teams, these organizations have in common with each other. And what I saw was they're all constantly having to change because the world is constantly changing,
Yeah.
and they all feel pressured all the time. So that was okay, that is the status quo for them. And then I thought, okay, if I want to help them, because I started my company, Brain Matters, and I wanted to help them navigate that. Then I thought, then I need to study the ultimate high performance environment so that I can figure out how they do things and I can translate that to help these organizations.
Hmm.
It wasn't a huge leap for a Formula One fan to then say, I need to study Formula One. So that was just the beginning. So I had a
Uh-huh.
nice big laugh at the time with my friends because, like, how do you get into Formula One? I mean, I didn't know anybody. I was Dutch. I didn't even live in the UK. No connections whatsoever. But I did a lot of keynote speaking.
Uh-huh.
So everywhere I went, every stage that I was on, I started saying, this is the case. It's pressure. It's change. And the ultimate way to figure out how to deal with that would be to go into Formula One and to see how they do things and to learn from that. And when I started doing that, at one point, this was 2016, 17 maybe, there was
Hmm.
somebody in the audience who knew someone at Campos Racing. So one of the co-owners, and I was connected with him. And I remember I was very pregnant with my second child, and he called me and he said, I'm doing this. Bear in mind, I had only been to one race in my life because I didn't have any
Uh-huh.
money. I was not going to races or anything. So I was just watching on TV. And I had him on the phone, and he said, well, I'm doing this get together during the Monaco Grand Prix on a boat. Do you want to maybe come do a keynote?
And you're like, yes.
And he You got it.
I'll get back
I'm
to you in
17
a.
months pregnant, but I think I can make it.
And you were there and you went.
I
Oh my
went and I did
gosh.
the keynote and then again started talking about how valuable it would be to look into F1. And then there were obviously a lot of F1 people there. So that's how the ball started rolling. And that's how I ended up where I am today.
That is crazy. I mean, to not be at any of the races to then jump to Monaco,
Yeah.
the most high class, luxurious, celebrity based, historic race is
Yeah.
absolutely mental. So I'm glad that you got that experience and I'm glad that obviously you're where you are now. But then take me back to Brain Matters. So obviously you just mentioned then at this time Brain Matters already started. How did
Mhm.
you start up Brain Matters?
Kind of as a side hustle. Because leaving academia, when I got that chance with that entrepreneur, I was like, okay, do I immediately want to do this? Like freelance, what am I going to do? So I just basically let him hire me.
Uh-huh.
But when I started to realize that, because he's very salesy guy. So he was like, okay, if you can do this for me, you can do this for our clients as well. So I started going to his clients and then they started contacting me separately to ask, can you come by? Can you give some advice? And that's when I thought, well, I mean, I could just go to the Chamber of Commerce and, register a name and see what happens. So it started very small, but yeah, again, saying yes to people. I'm not, I know people tend to not believe me, but I'm not a very extroverted person. I'm fairly introverted when it comes to networking. So this took practice,
Uh-huh.
but I started to just, put myself out there more and communicate and just sort of contact people. And by making those connections, that's how it sort of gently the ball started rolling with Brain Matters as well, until at one point, after I'd done a stint as head of people and culture at some organization, I said, I'm leaving, I'm going to go full time, and haven't looked back since.
Uh-huh. So that's obviously how it all came into fruition. We then jump back over to the motorsport side of things, which is
Yeah.
just amazing. So then tell me, what have you found out, working in motorsport specifically from a high performance psychology, neuroscience perspective? What do we not know about Formula One from that side of things?
I think that the fluffy stuff matters
Uh-huh.
and they care about the fluffy stuff. They just don't know it or they
Uh-huh.
won't say it out loud. All of the stuff that I do it's around building trust, about building psychological safety, creating inclusive environment. It's about being vulnerable. It's about communication. This is what everybody always, well, used to. I definitely see a change now, but what used to be framed as the fluffy stuff, whatever, just drive the car.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case. I think the realization has set in that the fluffy stuff is going to
Uh-huh.
make the car go faster. So
Uh-huh.
there is a huge focus, a huge spotlight now on things like psychological safety, which I think is incredibly important because it is the foundation of high performance. And that's something that I hadn't expected them to embrace it as much as they did. But obviously, I'm very happy that they did because it leads to sustainable high performance. And that's
Uh-huh.
the important part, sustainable performance.
So keeping that high performance obviously go on for a longer time, not just, oh, we'll just sort this out now and then we'll just forget about it again. Or you see this more of let's celebrate mental health for 1 month and then it's not celebrated ever again and no one's looking after. So that's why you use the word sustainable because it's like, no, let's keep this going. Let's keep these environments cultivating and not just do it for 1 month or one day or whatever it is. So, what are
Absolutely.
those sorts of traits that you see in more high performing people from, I don't know, the psychological aspect, the neurological aspect? What are those traits?
So I looked at culture, leadership, and the individual. So when you look at individual high performers in motorsport, then what you see is that they have a number of things. Firstly, they have talent.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna deny.
You have
I
to.
think yeah, it's important. If you want to be a true like elite performer in what you do, then it's important for you to figure out what is my talent and to really then hone that skill. So it's
Yeah.
talent in a combination with, call it drive, call it passion. I think what it comes down to is having a really strong intrinsic motivation. So motivation that comes from the inside to actually hone your skills, practice, train, even when you have setbacks. So those two things go hand in hand, talent and motivation. But then on top of that, when you look at sort of the wiring of high performing brains, it's risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we have a frontal lobe here right behind our foreheads, and that tells us, be careful, don't do that. Think of the consequences.
Yeah.
It's actually sometimes good if that frontal lobe is a little bit less loud,
Uh-huh.
because then you start trying new things. So that risk taking is there. Another one is having, and this one is very much related to mental health actually as well, having an internal locus of control. What we mean by that is the locus of control is where do you think the control is over the stuff that happens in your life? Is that internal or is that external? If you have an external locus, then you're more likely to say, things didn't. So a driver will say, I lost, but tires were shit.
Yeah.
And, it was raining and pit stop was slow. Like they will point to other things other than themselves.
Uh-huh.
And people with an internal locus of control are very driven to look at, okay, that's great. The tires were shit and the pit stop was bad, but what was my role in this? So having that internal locus of control is what's going to help you to improve because you look at what is my part in this and how can I make sure that whatever setback I went through doesn't happen again? And obviously that gives a whole lot of confidence because you feel like you are in control of your destiny. And then there's more,
So
but
many, I'm
yeah,
sure.
there's so many. Yeah, but I'll pick one. I'll choose one more that I think is very important because it is one that's not talked about a lot, and that is the value of cognitive empathy. Empathy, again, is often seen as one of those fluffy things, but cognitive empathy is being able to understand what other people are thinking and what other people are feeling and how we can align our behavior to make sure that we are aligned with them and they want to work with us. So that's important to build a team around you, obviously, to work together with people. If you're a driver on track, cognitive empathy is going to help you predict what the other drivers are going to be doing so that you
Yeah.
know how to respond. And that you have to balance that with, you need high levels of cognitive empathy and sort of medium levels of what we call effective empathy. And that's
Uh-huh.
about feeling other people's emotions. So when somebody is sad, you get sad too. You need to have it. Please have it because if you don't, like that's
Don't be
serial
a
killer.
robot. Yeah, we don't want any of that. We want the empathy, but just
You
not
have the empathy?
too
Yeah, definitely.
much empathy. Because then
Yeah,
obviously it does then reflect back on your performance. If you're always worrying about other people and going, oh, I feel bad for them and I feel bad for them, you're taking that
yeah,
away from your own performance.
exactly. So that effective empathy, yes, it's there, and I think it's a power to have it, but you want to sort of regulate it so that you do choose yourself when
Yeah.
push comes to shove.
So the most interesting thing that really stood out for me there was about the obviously risk taking
Yeah.
aspect of it. You don't want too much, but you don't want too little. Can you dive into that a little bit more? Because I'm also a racer and I'm now in that fine line of am I too cautious as a racing driver? Because I don't really want to be making those super bold moves because in my head I'm thinking, but I'm going to ruin my race and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So dive into that a little bit deeper for these high performing people.
Well, I think you describe it very well. There has to be a balance there.
Uh-huh.
But if you're not willing to find the limit, which you can only find if you cross it,
Yeah.
then you're never going to find your performance ceiling.
Uh-huh.
So if you're not willing to go over the limit, then basically your fear is going to determine your ceiling. I
Yeah.
don't think that that's what you want. Stay safe. Don't be stupid.
Of
Don't
course.
make
Don't
mistakes.
be irrational,
Yes,
but
exactly. It is about calculated risk taking. But
uh-huh.
sometimes crossing that line, and that has a massive, massive factor there is not being afraid to fail.
Yes. And
That's so
obviously,
important.
you have to fail to then be able to learn, okay, what did I get from that? I'm not going to do that again, or I need to do that just maybe a little bit less, do a minor version of what I've just done there. You learn so much from that. But I also want to talk about stress.
Yeah.
Stress in these environments obviously is always going to be there. They're high
Yeah.
pressure environments. So you're going to be stressed whether you're an engineer or a driver or part of the marketing team. There's going to be stress in the motorsport world, of course. How does that affect one's performance? Because I know you've spoken previously that it can actually help at times. And sometimes I feel like I'm that person that I kind of need to be put under a little bit of stress to make me go. So
Yeah.
what sort of the categories of it? How does it help someone and how does it also hinder
Yeah.
someone?
It doesn't surprise me that you're a driver, so it doesn't surprise me that you say
Have
I
to
need that
be.
stress because
Yeah.
that is kind of there's this bit of a selection bias in people who race. But generally speaking, so another word for stress is pressure. So
Hmm.
stress is just pressure being put on you. And what happens when we have a stress response is our brains are constantly, specifically our amygdala, which is a tiny brain area in the middle of our brains, it is constantly assessing threat and risk and constantly assessing, are we safe? Do we need to do something? Can I predict the outcome here? And if it cannot predict the outcome, which often happens in these high pressure, constantly changing environments, your brain will produce a stress response. But that is just a physiological reaction that starts in the brain and then goes to your adrenal glands, and then you just get that, you get the hormones in your body. It's
Uh-huh.
just physiology. There's nothing good or bad about that. It's neutral, and it creates alertness, which is good. What happens then is our thinking brain kicks in. And then we start to have an opinion and thoughts about the fact that we have a stress response and the fact that things are uncertain or that we are under pressure. And then it can go one of two ways. Either you frame that stress and that pressure as a threat, or you frame it as a challenge. And based on that, very different behaviors pop up. So if you're on the side of, okay, I feel threat, I have that threat reaction, then you get negative stress, and which
Uh-huh.
means that you move towards rigidity. And rigidity in a high pressure environment is never a good idea because it leads you to only, like, it's when you black out, you can only think of one thing to do.
Yeah.
That's where you have the bad stress response. So you want to be on the other side. You want to be on the side of stress as a challenge because then you see resilience. And I spent a lot of time looking at, sounds a little weird, but looking at resilient teams,
Uh-huh.
um, trying to analyze what exactly do they do that makes them resilient. And it is a high level of creativity, fast problem solving, high levels of critical thinking, emotion regulation, all of the skills then that you need to perform under pressure. So it is kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that what is happening to you is negative, then it will be negative and you will become rigid and you become, less effective, which
Yeah.
makes it worse. And if you're on the stress as a challenge side of things, you become resilient and you show skills that will help you build even more resilience.
So if you're on that sort of other end of the spectrum, and obviously the stress does get to you and it makes you more rigid, what can you do to sort of stop that from happening? And I guess this can apply to many different environments, whether you're a presenter, broadcaster, whether you're a racer, whether you're the engineer, whether you're going in for a job interview, whatever it is, what can you do that can help you with your performance?
I'm going to try to, because there are so many different sort of tools and techniques that you can use. I'm going to try
Yeah.
to come up with like the easiest ones. I guess it's best to start with the easiest ones. So what tends to happen when we're under pressure and we have that negative response is we kind of spiral, right? We spiral
Yeah.
out of control and we start thinking of all the consequences of everything that can happen. So the first thing you can do is use something called action or parking lot. So
Uh-huh.
you ask yourself two questions. Is this something I can control right now? And is there a decision or an action that I need to take right now? If the answer is yes, well, then do it. If
Uh-huh.
the answer is no, park it. So
Get
literally
rid.
say, I'm just going to park it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to park it right now. It's artificial, obviously, but if you say, I'm going to park this, then
Uh-huh.
you tell your brain, it's in a box now.
Uh-huh.
It's parked over there, and then your brain will immediately calm down.
So say it out loud. Is that more
Mhm.
effective than just thinking it in your head?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Wow.
Because one really important thing I think for everybody to understand is you are not your brain.
Yes.
The mere fact that the brain can tell you something, it can produce thoughts, and it does so all day, all the time. But you can choose whether or not you want to do anything with those thoughts. So that means that there is, and this is a whole philosophical thing of consciousness and the brain and
Uh-huh.
whatnot, but you are not your brain. So you can choose to say, I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm just going to leave this. So that's one, park it. Second, also effective, set a time, 90 seconds, and just completely freak out. Just let it happen.
Get it all out.
Let it all
All
out.
that energy. Just
Go,
release
well,
it.
yeah, all the fear, everything. Go dive deep into all the worst case scenarios that you can think of for 90 seconds.
Uh-huh.
And then you stop. And then you say, all right, that was 90 seconds. Thanks. I'm going to move on now. So emotions, fear, anxiety, frustration, happiness as well. On average, they have a chemical life of 90 seconds unless we feed it with thoughts.
Uh-huh. So
So
get
if
it all
you
out for those 90 seconds,
get it out and then just
and then
move on.
hopefully it should just be sort of gone. If you find yourself worrying again, is it just do that 90 seconds again?
Yeah, and it's like a muscle that you have to practice, obviously.
Yeah.
It doesn't start out that way. And it's also, I think the important thing here is just to let your mind go, but not to actively think. So there's a difference between letting your mind just go and letting it all happen and actively engaging with it. So it's about
Uh-huh.
letting it go because then it does its own thing. And then after 90 seconds, it's kind of, it has dissipated.
Yeah.
So that's just something that you can practice over time. And then another one, this is the last one that I'll share because, like I said, I can go on forever about
There's
this.
so
But
many. And this is why I said we can talk for hours and
yeah,
hours and hours because there's
yeah,
so much that we can talk about.
yeah. But I want to mention this one because this is a powerful one. I do a lot of coaching, individual coaching, and a technique that I use is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is an approach. It's therapy is not even the right word. It's just an approach to help people deal with their inner dialogue. And one of the things that we often do is we have people name their brain.
Okay. That obviously helps them separate their brain.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's called cognitive diffusion. So you
Uh-huh.
diffuse your brain. That sounds really weird, but it's normal. So you diffuse the thoughts that happen from you as a person. And if you name
Uh-huh.
your brain, then instead of being like, oh, I'm thinking this, I'm saying this to myself, it's like, oh, that's Daisy again
Yeah.
telling me stuff. It's fine. Thank you, Daisy. I'm not going to do anything with it right now, but thank you for looking out for me. I appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
So, naming your brain immediately creates that distance, and it is incredibly effective in helping to sort of limit the impact of those negative thoughts that you can have in those situations.
That is so amazing because all these things I've never even, thought of or had conversations with anyone. The closest thing I can remember is my dad always saying, if you can't change it right now, which is quite similar to what you said, he was like, don't worry about it. But then I would spiral even more. What does he mean? How can I not worry about it? And I would be worrying about it even more because I'd be so annoyed that I couldn't
Mm,
stop worrying about it. So there's some really, really good techniques that I guess anyone can sort of implement, not just athletes and not just people in the motorsport Formula One world, but in every sort of scenario. And that's what you need to obviously get you through. And I do want to obviously get through the questions that people have sent in because there are some similar questions to that. So
yeah.
before we sort of end off the motorsport side of things, I do want to ask about from a driver perspective, mistakes breed mistakes. And that is what we see out on the track. When a driver makes one mistake, you kind of see that continuously through the rest of their lap. So,
Yeah.
can you explain a little bit more about that? What's going on in the brain in that scenario? And again, how can you then stop that from happening?
Yeah. It's all related to what we just talked about. It
Uh
is that
huh.
internal dialogue and being able to sort of compartmentalize stuff that happens on track. That happened. Accept it. Don't
Yeah.
fight it. It happened. It was shit. It's fine. And now we move on. So what you want to do there, and this is where that whole stress as a threat, stress as a challenge thing comes in. You need to make sure that you stay because there will be stress. I have never met anyone who drives fast cars who doesn't have a stress response.
Yeah.
It would be very, very unnatural not to have it, but you can let it work for you or against you. So that's where that internal dialogue has to come in, and you have to figure out and everybody's different in that respect.
Yeah.
For some, having that brain with a name will be like, okay, thank you for telling me I'm going to do it again. I'm going to just move on and keep driving now. For
Uh
some,
huh.
that will work. Others will use, so that's cognitive diffusion. Some people will use something called cognitive reframing, which means you challenge the negative thoughts that you have. And obviously, when you're in the car, it's difficult to do this in practice. So it's something that you have to train for a very long time for it to be effective.
Uh huh.
But that's challenging the negative thoughts or saying, park it. We're going to put it in the parking lot right now because there's nothing I can do about it. Whatever you need to do to help yourself deal with it, that's what you need to do. It's so incredibly individual. So when you see drivers, they all have different techniques.
Uh huh.
One that works for a lot of drivers, not for all, is visualization.
Mm-hmm.
Just to visualize, repeatedly visualize the perfect lap. And then if a mistake creeps in, you can go back to the visualization of what do I do now, moving on from that, because we're on a new part of the track. I can start fresh. I'm just going to go back to my visualization of this is how I was going to do that. Because your brain cannot distinguish, especially if you take it seriously, it doesn't distinguish between actually driving the lap and imagining that you're driving that lap. So if you do that in advance, that's kind of like preparing yourself for when that might happen
Yeah.
and then preparing yourself for what you might do in that moment. And the more often you visualize it, the more it becomes a neural pathway in your brain that you can sort of activate whenever you need it.
I was actually going to ask about that as well because people talk about habits and daily routines. Is that
Yeah.
the perfect way to implement some of these techniques? Just to keep on doing it and keep practicing it because you said it's like muscle memory. It's probably not going to happen the first time. Is it going to happen, a few tries later down the line?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a concept called neuroplasticity.
Uh-huh.
Neuroplasticity basically means that your brain can change based on your experiences, based on your own behavior. For a long time, we thought that neuroplasticity only happened in children and
Hmm.
that, a child's brain is still changing, but once you're an adult, you're set. That's actually not the case. Neuroplasticity is there throughout your life. The more often you've done something, which if you're older, you will have patterns that are more ingrained, the more difficult it is to change them. But
Uh-huh.
it's not impossible. It just requires repetition. I always liken it to like when you build a road, because what you're doing is you're creating connections between brain cells. And that starts out as a very sandy, bumpy road, and it's difficult to drive over it because there's potholes and whatnot. But the more often you do it, the more it turns into a motorway. And
Uh-huh.
once it's a motorway, then it's easy and you don't have to think about it anymore. And the brain loves that because it loves conserving energy. So repetition, repetition, repetition.
I love that analogy of the motorway. It's like, okay, then we're up to top speed now. We're off down the straight line of the
Yeah.
motorway. And then it's easy from there. Because that's another thing, a lot of people I find in this day and age are really stuck in a rut for whatever reason that is, whether it's social media, whether it's other stresses in their life, and they
Yeah.
can't get out of a rut of no motivation and fatigue and all these things. So, do you have any sort of techniques that they can implement to get them started on any sort of habit, whether you are, again, the driver, the presenter, whatever you are, and whatever realm that you're in? How can people get out of those ruts? Their brain is telling them, I don't want to do this, and this is so negative, and all of this. How do you start building these daily habits and routines?
Small steps,
Uh-huh.
incremental goals, celebrating successes, um, get off social media.
We need to talk about social media because that's
Yeah,
a
we
whole
will.
other
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, because that is just something that will just hook you and it won't let you go. And that's where demotivation actually comes from. So, but let's park that for now. I think if you want to get started on something new, your brain will tell you this is so difficult, it's
Yeah.
so big. So there's two sides of it. Firstly, figure out what you actually want. Because if you don't really want it, then it's going to be very difficult. If you're doing something because other people do it, or because you think that's the cool thing to do, but intrinsically you don't really want it, it's going to be very difficult to just, to keep going with it.
Yeah.
But if you're intrinsically motivated, so that means you have a passion for it, then funnily enough, the brain starts to minimize the impact of setbacks and it starts to minimize the disappointment. So it's more easy to keep going.
Uh-huh.
But getting started, sometimes it's absolutely okay to use sort of outside rewards a little bit just to get you. This is what we often do, for example, when somebody has to change their lifestyle. So you want it to be intrinsic. So you want the motivation to come from the inside. But in the beginning, that might not be the case yet. Then it's
Hmm.
absolutely okay to put a reward at the end and give yourself that reward once you've done it once. And then you give yourself a reward when you've done it twice. And then a reward when you've done it 10 times, 20
Uh-huh.
times, 100 times. And then at some point, the thing itself, whatever it is, will become rewarding because you start seeing results. And then it's intrinsic and you don't need that external reward anymore.
That makes me feel so much better because I am very partial to if there's something that, I've been really putting off for a long time, or even if it's just like a job that I found stressful, when I get back, I'm like, I'm going to order myself some nice food. That's my reward. I'm going to sit back and watch the TV. And I
Yes,
actually do that without realizing. So you saying that now, I'm like, okay, we're building
building
these pathways, Hopefully it's going to obviously get implemented better. But I do
Yes.
really want to answer some of the questions that have been sent in, which is sort of all about everything, really. One of them is how important is diet for high performing individuals?
So I'm not a nutritionist. I want to say that in advance, but yes, diet is important. I think the main thing to understand is that the science of nutrition is complicated and it keeps changing. So don't get stuck on one thing that has to work for you because it's been working for everybody else. It is about eating healthy.
Uh
I
huh.
think eating healthy is important. Just stay away from too much processed food, but also don't turn that into sort of if you become too disciplined about it, then it will work against you because you become stressed about the fact that you might not have done it the right way. So
Yeah.
find that balance between, yes, eat healthy. Every once in a while, it's okay to let go as well. As long as you get enough nutrition, enough vegetables, enough fruits, things like that, then I'm going to stay away from saying this food and that food because, again,
Yeah.
that keeps changing constantly. But make sure that you get what you need. So, for example, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've had diabetes since I was 11 years old. So I need to be mindful of that. And for me, intermittent fasting works.
Uh
So
huh.
for my blood sugar levels, because they're more stable it's just skipping breakfast, right? We call it intermittent fasting. It's
Uh
just,
huh.
we skip breakfast. For other people, they need breakfast to start their day to have the energy to keep going. So it is about finding out what works for you. Generally speaking, just limit the processed foods.
Because that is obviously going to have that negative effect on your brain. It's going to make you feel sluggish and all these
Yeah.
things. And then you're not going to perform as well if you're living off a McDonald's breakfast and then a Subway lunch and a Burger King dinner. It's probably not going to be the
Yeah.
best for the brain.
No, it's the fats and the carbohydrates that your brain gets addicted to. Like
Uh-huh.
literally, you can have a carbohydrate addiction, and that is very difficult because people tend to think like the word sugar rush is very, very deceptive because sugar doesn't actually, when it's in excess, it doesn't give you more energy. It makes you very, very tired. So it's just being mindful of those things. But again, without punishing yourself if you've been to McDonald's once, that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. A treat here and there, like you say,
Yeah.
reward yourself from time to time, and then that will
Yes.
help.
Yeah.
Some really good questions that are, again, now more sort of women focused, obviously with the Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK webinar, that's our focus, but also sort of general imposter syndrome, anxiety, like all these questions. So the first one is, what is imposter syndrome and how do you deal with it?
Mm. I
Difficult.
find it it's a difficult question to answer, and that's not because the concept itself is basically feeling like you're a fraud, right?
Yeah.
That's the definition of imposter syndrome. The thing is, imposter syndrome is not a female phenomenon, and
Hmm.
that's why I have a chip on my shoulder about this, because everyone has it.
Yes.
Everyone has it. When you step into a new environment, it is very normal to doubt your skills, to doubt yourself, to ask yourself, "Oh, I stepped up. Am I actually able to do this?" Even the most confident people will have those moments. Men have it as much as women have it.
Uh-huh.
Like I said before, I do a lot of coaching with senior people across motorsport. They all say, yeah, every once in a while, I feel like, I don't know if I can do this. So imposter syndrome is feeling like you are a fraud and you will be found out. And that leads to anxiety and that actually reduces performance. But it really is important to understand that that is a normal experience to have. It's okay to have it. And I think the moment you start accepting that, it kind of goes away
Yeah, you're
because then
not
you,
fighting it anymore. It's like,
no.
okay, let this breathe. Like you say, this is not me. This is my other brain, Daisy, that's telling me this, and it's not true. And
Yeah.
just separate yourself from it.
Yeah, basically, so what's basically happening at a neurological level, I'm trying to figure out how I can explain it in a way that helps people understand that it's not a syndrome.
Uh huh.
It's just it's human. So the brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly scanning for errors and mismatches between expectation and reality. So when you enter into a new situation, a new job, a new role, you've stepped up, you've done something, you've had a promotion, then there's a brain area called the anterior cingulate cortex, so the ACC,
Hmm.
that becomes more active. And that is just the brain's error detection system, trying to figure out, are you doing okay? Are you
Uh
on the
huh.
right path? Are we all right here? That's the feeling of imposter syndrome, comes from the fact that your brain is just scanning for, is there a mismatch here?
Uh huh.
Time, that will go away unless you keep telling yourself, I have imposter syndrome. And that's the fact, that's where it bugs me that women are much more, not because of them, but because of society. I'd love to be clear, I'm not blaming women and
Uh
girls for
huh.
this. But society keeps saying, oh, women have imposter syndrome. Women only apply for roles if they adhere to 100% of the character. If we keep telling them that, then that's what they're going to keep doing.
Exactly. It's all about the discourse, though. And this is what we say, when we're debating any sort of topic with women in motorsport or just women in sport or just in general. It's always because things are either not spoken about or they're spoken about too much. And that's what it always comes down to. Why aren't there more girls in motorsport? Because we don't speak about it, because no one pushes for it. It's
Yeah.
always about the discourse, whether you're on the not talking about it or the talking about it spectrum. So that is very beautifully put about imposter syndrome because we all go through it. We all have it, but it's these doubts in your head. What about when people then give you positive comments? Let's say you've come into a new job and they've gone, wow, you're fantastic at that. And then it finally makes you feel like you're good at the job. Is
Yeah.
that bad to have? Is that a bit of a hindrance because then now you're relying on other people's comments to sort of validate you? Would you say kind of steer away from that and try and find that validation within yourself? Or is it okay to have that validation from other people?
I think both is fine. I think it's similar to what we talked about before when you're building new habits that you start with the external rewards and then it
Uh
becomes
huh.
internal. I think you want to, it's okay. I mean, I love validation. I love people telling me I'm doing a good job.
You're not going to
I'm not
say
gonna,
no to that.
no, I won't say no to it. I will, and also, and that maybe that is something that to do with that is to accept it.
Yeah.
Say thank you. not to minimize what you do. Confidence is key.
Uh-huh.
So don't minimize. When somebody gives you a compliment, say thanks, appreciate that. And don't say, oh, it was just because blah, blah. No, don't apologize for it.
Which
You did
I'm
that.
so guilty for that. I'm like, oh no, well, this, and I was thinking this, and they're like, just take the compliment.
Own it, woman.
Yeah.
So that's one side of it. To just so it's okay to have that external validation, but what you could do in addition to that is have something like what could we call this? An accomplishment board or a wins journal, where when you feel like you've accomplished something, you write it down. So you can write down the external validation, that's fine, but also write down when you feel that you've done a good job.
Uh-huh.
Because then you can go back over time and you can read your wins journal. You can be like, I'm pretty awesome. And that's how you build that internal confidence.
Which is so true as well. I think about looking at what you've achieved in these sort of fast-paced environments. You're on to the next job and the next job, the next job, and you don't sit back and go, wow, I've done a fantastic job here. I did this and that and this and that. You're always focused on the next. I think that also doesn't allow you to find that full confidence of, I'm actually doing fantastic at the minute. We
Yeah.
do only have 15 minutes left. I'm so cautious because we can talk again for another 500,000 hours. So, looking at my questions here, I'm going to go from more order of importance. How to stay confident as a female in a male dominated environment. You are a female in a male dominated environment. You can speak from experience, but you can also speak from that psychological, neurological aspect as well.
Yeah. Um, so I think for a long time, people from underrepresented groups, so in this case, that would be women in motorsport, but it could be any underrepresented group. There are many. Um, they were taught, oh, if you want to be part of this, you have to fit in. Try to fit in.
Yeah.
Because if you try to fit in, then you'll be fine, and then they won't push you out, you won't be excluded. I actually think from a confidence perspective, as well as just from a performance perspective, that it might be better to not fit in, but to stand out.
Yeah. Because then you're not trying so hard to be like everyone else, and that's a whole other pressure.
And to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
It's better to stand out for who you are, for what you have to offer, and to really embrace your difference and to really build that confidence. Because confidence it's not something that you're born with. It's not a trait, it's a skill,
Uh-huh.
and you build it over time. So to really just be okay with being, at least now, this is the mixture of the neuroscience and the personal perspective. My personal perspective, I have a weird career. It's like a roller coaster, up and down, round and round, everywhere. And I ended up in motorsport because I really wanted to. It's not like there was a job. I didn't apply for
Uh-huh.
a job. There was nothing. And I got to a point where, like, hold on, if I stand out, then I'm special
Mm-hmm.
and unique. And maybe then I have something to offer that's not already there. So it is about just embracing the you of who you, what do you have to offer, to repeat that for yourself and to just stop trying to fit in. Because what happens when we try to fit in is we start masking parts of our identity because
Yeah.
we don't want to show that identity. So that would, in this case, for example, if you're a woman and you start just acting like a man because that's like you do the banter and the whole thing, even though you might not be comfortable with it, that means that you're spending mental resources, brain power on masking that part of who you are. And that then means that you're not using that brain power to perform.
Mm-hmm. And I can
Which is,
actually give you a fantastic case study of exactly what you've just said there. Over the weekend, I was working with a fantastic commentator and I was talking to him about his career, and he'd been in the industry for 10, 20 years. And he said the first 6 years he thought he was awful. And I was like, why is that? What's the reason? Why are you a bad commentator? And he said, I was trying to be something else. I was trying
yeah,
to be what I thought a commentator was, and I wasn't myself and I wasn't authentic, and it reflected in his performance. I mean, if you look back, his performance has always been great. But you can see that obviously progression of where he is now to where he started. And it's exactly what you've said. If you're trying to be someone else, that's never going to work for you. It is going to come out subconsciously through your performance of, this isn't me. It's going to show all the negative parts because it's not you.
it isn't. And I think a second element, because it's hard to break into the business, right? It's
Yeah.
difficult. It's not easy. Um, I've never, I mean, I love Formula One. And sure, I've always wanted to work in Formula One. But when that first phone call came, it wasn't, I was like, oh, well, this is the outcome. This is my first step. And I will go here, here, here until I'm here. And then I'm happy.
Uh-huh.
I was like, oh my God, I got to go to Monaco. So I did that. And then I started talking to people. I go, oh my God, I just had a conversation with someone at Williams and they want to talk to me for my study. Blah, blah. So it's like across that whole journey, everything that I experienced was so cool
Uh-huh.
that it was never, because there was a lot of rejection too. Like still, it still happens, a lot of
Uh-huh.
rejection. But I'm okay with that because I really enjoy the journey. And I think that's where that whole part of the passion for what you do and being truly motivated for what you do, it's not the, I mean, you can still be bummed out and I'm not going to deny that there are barriers. They're
Yeah.
there. But if you enjoy the journey, then you'll have fun along the way. And even if you don't reach the ultimate outcome for you, then you will have enjoyed the journey. And that makes it a whole lot easier to keep going as well.
And I was going to ask about rejection, really, but I guess you've already answered it. Is it just rejection happens and that's that, and you just have to enjoy the ride that you're on and hope for those highs and keep going for those highs, but you have to expect the lows as well?
Yeah, assume that it'll happen. Nobody goes through life, rarely, maybe there are exceptions, I don't know, but rarely do people go through life with no rejection and no setbacks and no disappointments.
Yeah.
But again, from a neurological perspective, if you love what you do, then your brain minimizes that and it amplifies the positivity of the journey that you're on and the things that you do get to do. And that is incredibly important because generally speaking, the brain does have a negativity bias
Yeah.
where we tend to spotlight the negativity. I think you need about 7 positive experiences to balance out one negative one.
Okay.
So if you love what you do, then that balance is a little bit more equal than it would be if you don't love it. So again, don't do it because you see other people doing it. You're like, oh, I feel like I need to do that to be cool. No, do what you love. Find the place that you love and then zoom in on that and enjoy that journey.
So I guess if you're stuck in that negative aspect of it and you've had every single no from all the emails that you've sent out to and all the job interviews that you've done, how do you get yourself out of that? Is it just like you say, then find those positives? And if you're into motorsport, go karting and go watch a race and do whatever makes you happy. If you're stuck in that negative mindset,
Yeah.
is that the way to do it?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And taking yourself out of the situation for a little bit as well, just to
Yeah.
give your brain a break. You
Yeah.
don't have to solve everything straight away. Accepting the fact that you are disappointed. Sometimes we try to fight it, which is also not what I mean. I don't mean when I say it minimizes the setbacks. It doesn't mean that you need to deny them. It's okay to feel sad when something that you really want doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The thing is, that's a fact, and that is not something that you can change. So when I talked about that whole acceptance and commitment thing, that's what that is about. It is about accepting the fact that these feelings are there, but that you don't have to let them determine your next step. So at some point, you're going to have to say, okay, I feel sad about this, but what is possible? What can I do? What opportunities are there for me? And then on top of that, obviously, you can start writing down the things that you're good at, like just doing affirmation stuff, just to build your own happiness and positivity again. That's part of it too. But I think the major thing, the thing that we struggle with as women, but I think as human beings, is to accept the fact that sometimes we are sad because we're supposed to always be happy, which is unnatural and not healthy, I think. So just accept the fact that those setbacks are there and you don't have to feel good about it, but then you do have to keep going.
Yeah.
If you're sad, keep going sad until you're happy again. It'll
Yeah.
go away at some point.
Find that light. It's not going to be dark forever, basically. Find something that helps to implement that. We did obviously very briefly talk about social media.
Yeah.
How are we seeing social media sort of affect high performance at the minute? Because you said with the scrolling and the addiction of going on your phone, are you seeing that affect these athletes, engineers, business people? Is that happening?
It's pretty bleak.
Then we'll end it on a high after this.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think the good news is that the people who are able to perform sustainably, they actually know how to balance that. So
Yeah.
they will put away. I interviewed Nico Rosberg a couple of years ago about his journey, and he has been. I love the fact that he has been so open about his journey and around mental well-being and performance and how he became a world champion. And he got rid of all of his social media, and he contributes part of his success to the fact that he had a flip phone, like just the regular. I don't know if you're old enough to even know
Basic,
what that
yeah.
is.
Get your Nokia, get
Yeah,
whatever
the
out.
Nokia, yeah, exactly. So I think that kind of amplifies what I'm trying to say. There's nothing wrong with social media. I can see that for many people, content creators, obviously they need social media. It's their job. I respect that and I acknowledge that. But when it comes to consuming social media, when it's not your job and you have a job next to it in which you have to perform, you have to be aware of the fact that the algorithms are designed to hook you. They are designed to keep you on their platform. They will do whatever it takes to keep you scrolling. And it is a continuous, let's take TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but I think I understand how it works. You scroll, you see a video, quick dopamine hit, short one, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, dopamine, on to the next one, another dopamine hit, another one, another one. But it's a lot of short dopamine hits, and it completely saturizes the brain
Yeah.
until nothing is satisfying anymore. That will lead to mental health issues, that will lead to depression, and especially like probably not a lot of children online right now, but for children, this is very, very bad for their brain development. And
Yeah.
this is something that we didn't know 10 years ago. It's something that we know now, but it's just I'm not against it. I use social media as well. I understand that it is just a part of our lives now. But when it comes to performance, make sure that you understand how you use it and you use it intentionally and moderately.
And that is so true because I definitely find if I'm in a negative mindset for whatever's happened, I go to
Yeah.
my phone. My phone is the first thing that, because I think it sort of just detaches you from what's going on, but it's not helping. It's just masking the issue, and you're scrolling, 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 you feel even worse afterwards. Exactly what you said. There's no sort of satisfaction anymore because it's just, yeah, scroll, scroll, da 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 da, and it's really not good. It's not a good coping mechanism. But going
Mm.
to our Q&A section, speaking of coping mechanisms, what are some coping mechanisms to help soothe anxiety?
Um, Well, the best one is mindfulness. And again, this is one of those words that I sometimes tentatively, very gently bring up when I talk to motorsport people. But the research shows that mindfulness fundamentally changes how the brain operates. So
Hmm.
we have, I said, there's an amygdala and then there's a frontal lobe. And those are basically the main areas that are involved in anxiety and overthinking and in being stressed and being anxious. What you want is for the connections between the amygdala and the frontal lobe to be strong. Because if those connections are strong, then when anxiety hits, when you're afraid of something, when something happens, you're able to sort of regulate yourself in the best way possible. Mindfulness changes the brain and strengthens those connections, which helps with decision making under pressure and it helps with decision making and reducing anxiety. Now, what mindfulness is, I think, is an important it's important to sort of debunk the myth that you have to go
Uh-huh.
to a 10-day silent retreat and eat quinoa and walk in flip-flops all day. That's
That
not what
is the
mindfulness is.
that is the sort of like image that people have of mindfulness, and is there
Yeah.
cross-legged in a robe, something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Funnily enough, when drivers are at their peak, have you ever been in a state of flow when you were driving, where you're like,
Uh,
I feel at one with the car, everything is just happening for me?
yeah.
Mindful state.
Ah,
That's
okay.
mindfulness.
Uh-huh.
Mindfulness is when you are perfectly in the moment. There is no tomorrow, there is no yesterday, there is only now, and things are right now are what they are. They might be good, they just are.
Hmm.
So mindfulness is whatever you need to do to bring yourself into the present moment. For some, that is meditating. For others, it's racing. For some, it's I have a window right here. If I get really stressed, what I can do is I can look out the window and I can just start naming things that I see. Just naming them, not having an opinion about them, saying I see a house, a car, a boat, a thingy, I see water, I see a trampoline. Because when you do those things, then what you're not doing is worrying.
Hmm.
You're not
Just bringing
catastrophizing
you into that moment then, and that's it.
into the moment. Whatever you need, running, exercise, whatever you need to do. So for everyone who's listening, keep that in mind. Mindfulness is whatever you need to do to be in the here and now so that you stop ruminating.
To get into the moment, especially with racing. I know sometimes if my performance starts to deplete, it's because I'm thinking about, oh, what am I having for breakfast? Oh, I'm feeling a bit tired. Oh, my arms are a bit achy. The
Yeah.
performance has gone. It's so gone out the way. I'm not in the mindfulness mental state anymore. I'm everywhere else but the car. And that's the issue. Okay, we do have 4 minutes left. So my last question for you, Marcy, is one that someone did send in, is what advice can you give to girls wanting to enter the motorsport industry?
Love it.
Uh-huh.
Make sure that you love it. Um, Make sure that you enjoy the journey. And I think it's kind of a summary of what I've already said, but it is do not be afraid to stand out. Don't think you have to be a certain way to fit into what society says motorsport is. The thing that surprised me the most was that I am a woman of color. So I have two of those diversity ticks going on.
Uh-huh.
Um, has never been a topic. Not once in my career so far has that been a topic because I didn't let it. I just focused on this is my skill, this is what I have to offer. So do what you need to do to combat that imposter feeling. I'm not even going to call it a syndrome anymore.
Yeah.
Just that
We're just
feeling.
going to eliminate that word completely.
Not a syndrome, it's just a feeling. And don't be afraid, don't fit in, just don't be afraid to stand out. Embrace who you are, what you have to offer, be vocal about it, and don't have one end goal in mind. Motorsport is really, really broad. So there are so many different things that you can do that you might not even have thought of in the beginning if you keep an open mind to just say, I have a passion for this industry, enjoy the journey, and then just see what comes of it.
And I love that because it is so true. I think a lot of people come into the sport and sort of only aim for Formula One, let's say, being the pinnacle of the sport. There are so many other series, so many other categories of racing, open, broaden your horizons. Don't think it's just that one thing, exactly what you said. You could end up here, you could end up there. I mean, I started doing GT series. I had no idea about GT racing, threw myself into it, and now I'm across all the different sports in motorsport. And that is the beauty of this sport, but also just life in general. Say yes, take those opportunities, and obviously stand out if you can. Exactly what you said, Marcia. Don't be afraid to be yourself and be authentic. But thank you so much for your time. Honestly, I could talk to you for hours. I'm actually really sad this is ending because I could ask you so many more questions and about hormones and other parts of brain health and all these things. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK for hosting these events. Everything that they do for getting more girls into the sport is amazing. It's absolutely unmatched. And we need more of this and we need more discourse. So thank you so much. And everyone watching as well.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to us natter about all the different topics and the amazing things that Dr. Marcia Goddard has to say. For anyone who isn't a Girls on Track UK community member, the community is totally free to join. You can go to the Facebook page. We have over 10k members. It's amazing. So the link will be in the chat right now. And we also have a quick survey, which we would love for you to complete as well, which is all about, the future of Girls on Track and how you find these webinars. So thank you so much. Look in your mailboxes about news and upcoming events and opportunities. And thank you all again. See you soon.